Well, hello. Today I am so thrilled to welcome a dear friend named Dina Zebel. She is a certified professional life and soul care coach. And now you're saying, what in the world is that? Well, we will get to that. First, I just want to introduce you to Dina, the woman behind it all. So let's find out just a little bit about her first, and then we'll find out what this is that she does. Dina, can you tell us a little bit about you and why you're doing what you do?
Yeah, I'd love to, Krista, and thanks for having me. So I live in the Wisconsin area. I'll first tell you about I have a wonderful husband and a adult daughter, and love them very much. And for years, actually, I was a photographer. I had a 20-year photography career, and what I found was that as I was downstairs editing my photos, I just longed for something more. I longed for God to use me in more meaningful ways. I lived through a difficult story and I just knew there was something more. And I began to pray about that and sort of search. And the reason is I went to a conference, and on the way home from that conference with a friend of mine, I was talking and I said, if I was younger, I'd go to school for counseling. But I knew that God wasn't calling me to that. And she just brought up the idea of life coach. And it had come up a couple other times prior to that. And I went to school, I got certified, and I love asking good questions. I love helping people untangle what they might be struggling with, and it's just exciting work to me. And I do it because I've had places in my own life where I have struggled, I've been alone, things maybe have felt hopeless or chaotic, and we all need somebody to sometimes navigate those places with us. And I just really have a heart to walk alongside people and bring what I can bring, and ask good questions and help them discover where they're stuck and what they can do about it so that they can live more fully, and also just to discover what God is inviting them to in their lives.
Well, that sounds super awesome. How thrilling that is of how God has led you to do what you do now, and how beautiful that you can do that with other people. Um, so if you could give a little more detail maybe to your specific, because we hear about coaches, it's like the thing now. I feel like there's all these people are coaches, but I know their expertise, their different areas that they zone in on. And for you, it kind of says it in your title, right? The professional life and soul care coach. And I love that name because our soul, we really need to care for our soul to really be alive, to be empowered, to live the life we are meant to live. So if you can explain a little bit, what is your specific coaching expertise? What does that look like?
Yeah, I would say it's really centered around relationship, and that's relationship to others, but it's also relationship to ourselves and to God. And those three things really interplay together in our lives. If we're struggling, for example, in a relationship with a spouse or a friend, there is a self component to that, there is a God component to that. And so working through whatever the dynamics might be. And another thing is that there's a human condition, right? There's things that we all share in common. We all have brokenness, we all have wounds, we all have deep longings, and to help people understand that and grow in self-awareness about themselves. One of the things I like to say is knowledge is power, and the more we understand how we operate and the things that have contributed to who we are as a person, the more then we can have choice, and we can navigate things in a way that's more life-giving. Um, and so sort of that human condition, we all experience disappointment, we all experience hurt, but learning what that is for us and where is it keeping us tangled, I think is critical. And so I would say that's primarily it, and just helping people to gain clarity so that they know where they need to take ownership, where they've maybe not taken ownership that they need to, and help them to kind of develop a structure in moving forward so that they can gain some momentum and get where they really dream of being.
That sounds awesome. When you first said, relationship with God, relationship with others, relationship with yourself, I was like, relationship with yourself. I don't think I've ever heard that phrase before. I believe you kind of described that. So basically, what you're saying is really understanding yourself and what you think of yourself and how that comes out. Is that what you mean by that?
Yes, and I think we also have to learn, and again, many of us come from some wounded places, and self-care and even parenting ourselves at times
Mm,
doesn't come natural to us.
right.
And yet sometimes we need ourselves. We need to show up for ourselves. We need to care for ourselves. We need to counsel ourselves. I think of well, I forgot what I was going to say, but just that I'm in charge of me. And so for example, if I'm out in the world and I'm just really nice with other people and I'm caring for other people, but I'm not caring for my soul and myself, then I really am doing all those other things out of the wrong place.
Mhm.
And I really just have a heart for people to get in touch with, um,
Ah,
the way
there
that
it is.
they minister to themselves so that they can then go out and do that thing that God is inviting them to.
I love how you said get in touch with themselves because, and that may sound weird to some people, but I have been on a journey, in similar ways and learning basically some of the things that you're talking about. And really what you're saying, getting in touch, it's paying attention instead of just
Yeah.
ignoring all those subconscious thoughts and things and voices in your head. You're paying attention and now you're asking yourself questions and okay, so
Uh,
that's great,
I
great.
mean, I can share an example with you, I think, from my own life that just for whatever reason came to mind right now, if you
Sure.
like.
Yeah.
Um, so I grew up with a narcissistic father, and he was a charmer, and he knew how to manipulate people. And so where that shows up is, I would go into the furniture store with my husband, and or this store or that store, and the salesman would approach, and right away there'd be something in me that would rise up, that, kind of, if you could just think of physically putting a hand up, like, you know I'll be fine, I'll let you know if I need help, right?
Mhm,
And my husband could really never understand why was I so against having a salesman help me.
mhm.
And I began to ask that question, well, why is that a problem? And what I realized was, I knew that my father was a salesman and that he was a manipulator and at times unkind and used people.
Mhm.
And I took that and I related it to these people who are just trying to do their job in the store. And once I realized that, right, I could sort of talk to myself about it, go, no, is it really the salesman's fault? And do you really want to be that or feel that? And then now I have choice,
Yes.
right? I
Right.
know that when I'm going to go into the furniture store, that there's going to be a visceral reaction in me because of that part of
Mhm.
my childhood,
Right.
but that I can go, you know what? I'm going to go out of my way to be extra nice to that person. I can still refuse help and let me just look, but
Mhm.
I can do it in a way that doesn't feel so offensive.
Yeah, that's a great example. That's a great example. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, and I think that is definitely a huge part of our growth and our journey in life to breaking free of the many things that we've dealt with. So, now this all sounds lovely and wonderful, but how are some examples that how are you able to actually lead people to accomplish their goals? What are some, do you have some concrete steps that you lead every person through? Is it more individualized? How are
Mm-hmm.
you able to lead them to do it because you can't do it for them, right? We all have
Yeah.
to do it ourselves. So how do you help lead them to do what they need to do?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is just establishing what the needs of the person who's contacting me are, what they're looking for, what their expectations are. Are they willing? Are they ready to do the work? And it's establishing that. But then also, I mean, I have tools that I use, and there are tools that I use more regularly. Like I have a core values assessment, for example, and core values are super important because when you really know what your top 3 or top 5 core values are, you know, then you have a decision-making tool. You can use those core values to go, this fits in with my non-negotiables. This doesn't fit in with my non-negotiables. So I do have tools like that that I do try to use in most cases. I also know that my story is a tool because sometimes people just need to know they're not alone in their struggle. And I feel like God has given me a vast amount of experience that often there's a short story or something I couldn't share that will create a safe environment. I can't ask them to go where I'm not willing to go. And if I'm asking them to be vulnerable in our time together, then I like to reciprocate. Not that the session's at all about me, but so my story, empathy, you know, I love asking questions. I love listening and just waiting for God to give me just good questions that are thought provoking, that challenge our thinking patterns. And, you know, a lot of times we all have go-to thinking patterns, and we need somebody outside of us to help us kind of challenge those and help us get out of that box and look at things from a different perspective,
Yes.
because often that's where we see answers that we didn't see before, right? Solutions that you know weren't there. And just I think too, the coaching session provides focus, right? It's a time of like coming together with someone, focusing on, you know, the topic that I want to be working on, and having somebody, you know, do that with me in a structured way.
Yes.
And just providing that focus. I mean, I know sometimes in life I may think about something, but then something else interrupts and woo, you know, something shiny and there I go.
That's my brain every day.
Exactly. And so we all need that, somebody to kind of rein us in and go, okay, now let's just focus here for a bit. And so that's how a coaching session kind of works. And it is individual because not every person's situation or thing that they're struggling with is the same. And then how they can go about it or lean into it is going to be different. What action steps for one person in a similar situation is going to be different from another person. You take introverts and extroverts, you know, they're going to do that different. Now, I mean, I actually believe introverts and extroverts, there's a continuum. You know, we're usually not all just one.
Right.
We might be at this far end or kind of in the middle, but they're going to do things differently. They're going to need to approach things, you know, in a different manner. So it's got to be more tailor-made. Mm-hmm.
That sounds excellent. And yeah, definitely, you know, different personalities, you know, and our different strengths and how we would respond, and is definitely makes sense. You say in the beginning, you said you asked them a question, you ask them if they're really ready. Do you have certain set questions that you ask them? Because in their mind, if they're calling you, they're either feeling you out or maybe saying, no, I am ready. So how do you know when someone is ready to do the work? Is it an assessment or just certain questions?
Yeah, at this time, I don't use an assessment for that. I mean, if they're calling me, I want to hear what's bringing them to my doorstep, and maybe ask some things like, you know, what is the pain or the desire there that that's motivating you to call me? Also, what have you tried? What have you tried that's had a little bit of success? What have you tried that hasn't had any success?
Okay.
You know, just some different things like that to sort of help determine whether we're a good fit. It's not even necessarily whether they're ready to work. I mean, that is a good question.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't necessarily ask that to everybody, because for some people that's going to be obvious that they're ready to work. Other people, maybe not so much.
Mm-hmm.
But are we a good fit? You know, that's really important to me, because what I want to do is I want to have influence and have impact. And if we're not a good fit, then that may not be the case. So just that initial conversation, you know, to find out where they're at
Yeah,
Mhm.
that makes a lot of sense. And again, and sometimes there are certain personalities or that, there may be just something about you that they're just not comfortable. And, and that really is okay. Then, and again, that's why we have multiple people doing multiple things. There's many coaches and there are some coaches doing similar things as you, but, personality. And then also the other part I loved about what you said is, a big truth probably is just structure, like setting, just like scheduling, especially if you're someone like me, and things are floating around in your head and they drop in at sometimes an inopportune moment. And so you can't deal with it. So you let it float around some more. So I think structure, obviously, or just setting that time aside. And then again, having that other voice for a different perspective. Those two things really stuck out as very valuable. They would be very valuable to me. They would help me move forward. And that's what you do when you schedule, to work out. If you usually have to have a set schedule, or this is when I'm gonna have my devotional time. So this is usually when I have it, because if you don't schedule it,
Mhm.
it generally, it might get in and it might not. So that makes a perfect sense.
I mean, most people want to see a coach because they want change. And change requires consistency and it requires intention. And I think that's kind of the environment that a coach can provide. And also, with to all of my clients, I have this little cartoon that I send out, and I'll send it to you. Maybe you can include it in with the podcast notes.
Sure.
But it is two gals sitting at a table, and one of them has a talk bubble above their head that's filled with just some chaotic string going every which way or whatever. And then the string goes across the table to the other woman's talk bubble, and she's got a spool and she is winding up that thread
I
and
believe I've seen that.
helping to make some sense out of it. And that's what I do.
Yes, that's an I've seen that cartoon, I believe, and it is an excellent image, of again just the plain and simple opportunity to speak to someone else. Obviously, you have the right tools and training to help actually make sense of it, but even just the fact of getting it out of your head, because sometimes it's so messy, it's so overwhelming, it's hard to process. And the fact of just talking to someone, so again, having someone you can trust to talk to obviously is such an important need in all of our lives, whether we're looking for coaching or not. But getting it out of our head, speaking about it, makes it seem less overwhelming and enables us to start to break it down and make more sense of it. Would
Exactly.
you be willing to share a few general stories of those that have experienced some life change through the coaching? Some examples of what has happened because they had a coach, because of what you've offered, they were able to break those wrong thinking habits and make some changes.
Yeah. Yeah. I can share a couple of, so I'm thinking of a woman that I worked with who, loved her husband. They had a good relationship in many ways, but they just had a difficulty with a couple of certain topics. And she had some difficulty using her voice. And so we just really dug into that. And there was self-awareness and, um, she was able then to lean into some hard conversations with her husband, who she loved. It was a good relationship, but they just had some places where they weren't communicating well. And we couldn't just work on, we couldn't work on her husband. Her husband wasn't in the room, but we could work on what she was bringing or what she could do differently to help those conversations go well. So I think of that situation. I also think of currently a couple that I'm working with, and it has been just so beautiful to see two people who aren't communicating very well at all, who are both coming from their own places of wounding, and I would say that there's some trauma involved, and they just have some behaviors that are learned that keep them from really connecting and hearing each other and being able to communicate well. And to work with them through that and help them learn some communication skills, learn about what their communication styles are, and really how to listen to each other better, how to be empathetic instead of right away running to defend themselves, those kinds of things. I mean, it's just breathtaking when you start to see people move past more dysfunctional behaviors or ways of relating, and they love each other. They just didn't know any better. So again, growing in that self-awareness of what they're doing, what they're bringing, and then how that's impacting the other person. So I think of that, and I just think of another gal who, just a lot of responsibility, a lot of chaos, and which anytime there's chaos, there's overwhelm.
Mhm.
And when we get overwhelmed, we start to shut down, and we really can't function well. And so just to provide that focus and that structure and start to help her talk through some of the issues that she was facing step by step, and looking at some of what the baby steps are that she needed to accomplish. Like, yes, there's a big picture, but you have to take one step at a time. And if we look at that big picture and we're only seeing that, we can't see everything else that's, just the smaller things, just the smaller pieces. And if we can just work on the smaller pieces, before you know it, you will be closer to that
Right.
destination that you're aiming for. So,
Like our
and
quick fixes, right? We do like our quick fixes, and when we can't find those quick fixes, then we're more overwhelmed because we're frustrated that we can't, when feel like we can't change it because it's just too much. And then, like you said, sometimes it's hard to even see those steps, and everything has steps, but when it's so big, you need someone to help pull that out and show you some of
Mhm.
the steps so it can start to make sense to you.
Yes. And I think too, when people are overwhelmed, there's anxiety that's present.
Hmm.
And really, in brain function, when we're in anxiety, we are not doing our best thinking, right? So that overwhelm and that chaos creates anxiety, and then we're just not able to really think through in the same way. If we were internally calm and serene, and things were, going along smoothly, we can usually think through things with more clarity. Um, yeah, so just to lessen anxiety too, because again, if we look at all the millions of steps that have to be done, and sometimes we know the end, but we don't know the steps. We
Right.
don't know any of the steps, and
Yes.
we get paralyzed, and then we're passive. But then we're overwhelmed because this thing, I want to go there, I need to go in that direction, but I can't because I don't even know what to do, and I can't even make sense of it.
Yeah. And I love, again, that focus on awareness is such a big deal, and I've been learning so much about that. And and sometimes I'm really paying attention to what's going on in my head, and other times I'm not. And you can just your emotions are so powerful, and like anxiety, that they really do. If you are always anxious, you cannot think clearly, you cannot be successful as you want to be, at your job or with your family or with those that you care about. You may love them dearly, like you said, this married couple loves each other, but they just don't get what their normals are. I talk about that a lot, your normals. We all have different normals, and when they're normal to us, we don't think about them because they're normal, right? Until we
Mhm.
start wondering, why are they normal, what makes them normal, and if they're normal, are they good, or are they a problem, like you're saying with this married couple. There's some things that they did, some habits, some automatics that were happening that were normal for them that they couldn't see was wrong necessarily.
Mhm.
And and I and I love that you're able to help do that for each other. And not even, you're not a marriage counselor, you're just a people counselor. You get people, and you get the core issues of how to open up and to pay attention. And it's so lovely to have someone to help guide and open you up and open up your eyes to pay attention to those details so that you
Mhm.
can make better choices or see how you affect others. I remember one actually this a couple times 'cause it takes me a while sometimes. I'm a little slow, I think. I remember having a conversation and listening to this one girl, and she was sharing some things with me, and then I kind of smiled and I kind of giggled, and she's like, "Well, why are you laughing?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not really laughing." And it wasn't something to laugh about, but I realized I didn't even know that I did it, but she was used to, she doesn't play games. She's very straightforward. And she's like, "Why would you be, laughing at that?" I'm like, "Well, I'm not sure. It certainly isn't funny." And then I realized, in this uncomfortableness, that this little giggle, and it seems totally stupid and foolish, but because she was able to point it out to me, it was great to go, huh. And then I started to think about that. Why do I do that? And so I love that, having someone to talk to, having someone to be real with you. Because, a lot of times our friends aren't totally real. Once in a while, we can get a few of those friends, but sometimes because they're our friend, they also don't want to hurt our feelings. And they're just there, your depends on what level your relationship is. Is it just having fun? Is it, something they don't, they're not married, so they're not going to say anything about how you are in your marriage or something like that. Sometimes our friends aren't enough. Sometimes we need to
Well,
seek out someone outside of our relationship that can see things a little more clearly and more obvious than people who are used to seeing our normal actions and just write them off because there are normals as well. Do you hear that word
yeah.
normal enough yet?
Yeah, I mean, our friends often want to just support us, right? They
Right,
love us and they want to support us, but sometimes maybe they don't even have the training to be asking
right,
hard questions, or maybe they don't want to ask the hard question. And
exactly.
the truth is, here we all have blind spots, and if we can be okay with that, and um, and be willing to um, learn what maybe some of those are. We don't even know sometimes what we don't know, and there's no shame in that. It's just, I like to think of this: if I were in a foundry or a factory and I had a machine to operate, I would know that machine. I would read the manual and I would come to know every nut and bolt because I'd probably have to fix them at some point. And I would be so familiar because one, I want to be effective at my job. I want to be efficient. I want to do what I'm going to do well. And in a way, we're a machine, and we have um, however many years you've lived worth of life experiences that have in some way influenced us, and then therefore influence our behavior, influence our decision making, and all of that. And again, if we can learn how I work, and Krista, you how you work might be a little different than how I work, right?
Right,
I might get, I might have the whole salesman thing might be an issue for me. That might not even concern you. And so we're all unique in that.
right.
We all have different stories. And so having a coach who you do trust, who can help to sort of broaden your view about who you are and how your machine works,
Mm.
it's just can be really valuable.
Yeah, I love that example. That is a great, because we are. And again, things influence us, and some of them have been very good, right? Even some things that don't seem very good, but yet how we responded could have been a really good response, and we learned well from that experience. But as we know, and as you've pointed out, there are a lot of things that are influenced us in not the right way, or how we've chose to respond since then has not been healthy or helpful for us personally, for our relationships, or for our work, because that's just the way life is, right? I talked just the other day, I talking about how life is not fair, and we can't change it. That's the way it is. When something bad happens to us, or something that is out of our control, what can we do about that? They have these great sayings, the comeback story, or the making lemons from lemonade, and those are all lovely. But sometimes, we can't do that on our own, because we do need friends, and we sometimes do need a coach to help us to see clearly, so that we can become more healthy and whole. And just like this podcast, Life Empowered, this isn't about selling people's services to other people. This is about learning what it is to be wholehearted, what it is to live this adventure that God has called us to, not just to survive, not just to make it through, but to look back at some of those influences that might have hurt us, but how can we change it now so it's no longer hurting us, but making us smarter and wiser and more alive, more understanding, yes, more wise, I think is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and living and being able then to live with the intention that we want.
Yes.
I mean, if one of my core values, so for example, one of my core values is
Wait,
investing.
could you hold on one second? I would love to hear that, but I want to just rewind a little bit, because what was that you said right before you said your core value? You said something that I just lost now, but it was, what, do you remember what you said?
Well, living with intention, right?
Living
So
with
that we,
intention. I love that point, because not only are now it's not just reacting and recovering and restoring, but yes, now we can live with it. Now we don't have to always react and always go back and restore. So that's another mind-blowing, fabulous part. It's not just recovering, it's,
right.
oh wow, now we can really move forward in intention and on the offensive, not just the defensive, right? I
Yes,
love that
absolutely.
point, and I really wanted to catch that, because that's a whole nother thing that we hadn't really pointed out until now. And I love that, living with intention. That's exciting.
And all of that other work, should it be necessary in a coaching session, all leads up to that, right? To being able to now live with more intention, more wisdom, as you said,
Yeah.
with more clarity, because I know now where I'm going. I know a little bit about what's been holding me back, and I can really catapult myself
Yeah, that makes
forward.
me
That's
excited. Going
mhm.
back and looking at stuff, that's hard work, and I see that it's important, and I've done it. And so, yes, that's good. But then when you talk about that, then I'm excited. I'm excited that there's even more hope. There's more things to look forward to. And I think that right there is the best
Mhm.
part.
Mhm.
So I'm sorry, distracted you from your moving thought, but if that's still relevant, I'd love for you to expand on what you're going to say about one of your core values.
Yeah, I think it totally fits in here because so one of my core values is investing. And what I mean by that is investing in people. That is something that I want to base my life on, right? Both because I love Jesus and because it's my heart to take what God has done in my life and to use it for the good of others. And so investing, right? So now that I know that, and I know what my other core values are, for example, I can then live with intention. If something comes along and it doesn't fit that core value or my other core values, I can go, that might be good, but it's maybe not the best thing for me right now because it doesn't fit into this,
Mm,
what my non-negotiables are.
that's
And
a great example of intentionality right there.
yeah,
That's how you get to
yeah,
use it intentionally. That's beautiful.
yes, yeah.
So obviously, we've kind of really talked about why coaching can be such a valuable resource. Is there anything else that you'd want to say about why coaching would be so valuable and important that we haven't brought up?
Um, I think the only other thing that comes to mind right this second, Krista, is just tools. Coaches love tools. And there's just a million ways to look at something, but sometimes we just need a different tool or a different perspective. And me, because I used to be a photographer, I'm just a very visual person. And I mean, I have just a list a mile long of visuals that I want to create because something will come up in a coaching session and I'll be like, oh, I want to create a visual for that because but I often think people can understand things in a visual way and easier, you know.
Mhm.
And so tools can be really important. One that I've created, for example, is called the window of emotion. And if you would imagine a box, and inside that box are a million other little boxes until it gets down to a tiny little box. And what can happen sometimes when people do experience difficulty growing up or difficulty in family dynamics is their window of emotion starts to close down,
Mm,
right? And one, they're protecting themselves so that they don't feel the pain,
mm-hmm,
whether that situation is in the past or in the present. And but the other thing is they prevent themselves from feeling anything.
mm,
And when I've shown people just that simple visual, they begin to understand something internally about what they've been doing. You know, I don't show it to everybody. Sometimes it's an appropriate tool to use, but so yeah, I have a lot of tools like that that can bring understanding about something that's more difficult to put words to.
mm-hmm. I
Um,
like how, to me, it's like you're connecting the dots, the visual, the verbal, and helping make it more understanding. So you have a lot of tools you use. Do you have tools that you give to them then as well?
I do like the core values assessment, for example. That's something that they work on. And then once they've gotten at a certain place with it, then we come together and I help them narrow those down to their top 5. And the other thing is I also we do as a part of that, we also do an anti-value list.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and there's other tools like the Strength Finders test is something you can do online,
Yeah.
and I will just direct them to that, and then once they've done the test and they've learned their top 5 strengths, we both print those off, and then we just do some conversation around that, because sometimes people don't even know what are my
Right.
strengths, what am I good at. If it's somebody who is trying to make a career shift and they're at a place. I coached with a gal who was in the financial industry for years and years and years and years, and just couldn't possibly think of what else was next for her. And so, like that Strength Finders was a great conversation tool because it gave us some information about who she was and what she might be good at, and it just became a springboard for a lot of conversation. So some of the tools I use are things that are out there. I have an excellent tool that I use um, from a gentleman. His name is Terry Wardle. His ministry is called Healing Care, and he talks about boundaries. And he has created a visual tool that really helps us to understand healthy boundaries and then different types of unhealthy boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's just a visual way to look at something, and it can really help us to understand at a deeper level. And I know for me personally, sometimes I bring those visual tools back up when I need them in my life as a reminder, like, oh, okay, that's not on the healthy ranch, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Excuse me. Yes, I love those tools you mentioned because we always recommend those tools as well to our champions at Redeem and Restore Center. And we have different trainings and encourage them to do the Strength Finder, to, know your strengths. Because if you don't know what you're good at, how do you get better at it? And so, oh, I don't know what happened. But anyhow, the Strength Finder is an excellent tool we recommend with our volunteers all the time. And also the Enneagram is another great tool. Again, I think a huge piece is learning more about ourselves. And the more we can learn about ourselves, and accepting who we are, because I think our culture often, is always telling, look at them, don't you want to be like them? Or even social media. Social media is a great tool, but again, it can warp our senses sometimes, and we see, oh, their life is so perfect and they always look perfect in their pictures, but that's not really normal, and we're accepting these lies. But if we get to know who we are, and value what our strengths are, and value what is good, that's a huge first step and beginning to walk forward and live a more empowered life and keep learning. I think
Yeah.
learning is a great thing. So the more tools you have and really processing that information is helpful, but then talking about it with others is another a great tool, because some
Yeah.
things may not make sense to you, right? And or you don't understand why you can't be better at this other thing. But again, like you talked about, we're all unique. We have differences, and that's good. And we need to learn to accept that and enjoy our uniqueness and find the joy in what who we are and what we're good at. And so and the
Yeah.
boundaries is another tool, and also knowing if you're codependent or not. There are tools out there to find out if you're definitely have codependent issues, and if you do, you probably definitely need to talk to someone to help you work through that, so you
Mhm.
can be more secure and confident in your value. So tools are great. Tools are great to help measure things, lead people, and to get to know yourself as well. So that's why I wanted to ask about tools.
Well, I think about the name of your podcast, Life Empowered, right? And if we're going to be empowered, we've got to have knowledge, we have to have tools. And here's the thing is, as you said, God has made each of us unique and intends to bring something to others through us. And if we are comfortable in our own skin and we know our strengths and we know what we're to bring
Yeah.
and what God is inviting us to, it also frees up other people to bring who they are and to bring their strengths, because now we're not in competition. If we're unique and living out of God's invitation to us, and we know our strengths and we're growing in those places, then we allow other people. And I know that in some of your literature, whatever, you talk a lot about supporting others and let's do this together.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can embrace our uniqueness and our strengths, and then we're able to do that and give that as a gift to others,
Yes.
that I
Everybody.
value you for
Sorry.
your goodness.
Yes, value for your goodness. That's great. And I was then thinking, sorry, I started to interrupt you too early. Proverbs 27:17. I love that verse. And that is a lot what you were just talking about and supporting. It says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. So if we're all being like each other and not ourselves, we can't really sharpen each other. We're just like, oh, kumbaya, we're all the same. And obviously we know we're not. But if we, again, are strengthened in our uniqueness so we can sharpen one another and complement one another, then we can do so much more together, as like you were saying, because yes, our mission is really about building a culture of loving, restoring, and supporting one another. And we can't do that if we aren't accepting who we are and valuing our uniqueness, and there to encourage
Mhm.
and sharpen one another. So I love that. Thank you for that. I
And when
Oh,
we're
do you have
not
one more
doing
thing to
that,
say? Yes, please share whatever
just
else you'd like to
last thing,
share.
when we're
Yeah.
not when we're not doing that, we land often in comparison and competition,
Oh, yes, great. Pulling it out.
right? And that is really something in any relationship dynamic is toxic.
Yes.
And again, so if we can come from that place of really being able to value who we are, who God's made us, what we're to bring, we'll be able to give that gift to others. And there's just less comparison, which ultimately leads to shame, and
Mhm.
there's less competition, which leads to division.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for that. Well, Dina, thank you so much for spending time with me today. Hopefully others have been encouraged and inspired to learn more about themselves, and also consider maybe that a coach would help them work through this season of their life or season. Because I assume, I forgot to ask this, that the length of the coaching is totally based on what the need is and what they're looking for, right? So it can be it can be what, a year, it could be a month. What are the time frames? Are they very,
Yeah,
very
I would say most people coach for longer than a month. I mean, if they were just working through a very specific, more practical type issue, a
Mhm.
month might be appropriate, all the way up to a year program where they have me walking alongside them for a year journey. And the first step, I'll just tell you what that is, because that might be helpful to anybody listening, is that we would meet and we would do a free consultation and really talk about what I said earlier. What, what is it they're struggling with? Where is it they want to go? What's the pain? What's the desire? What have they tried? What do they hope will happen? How long do they think it will take to get, just all of that, so that we can see if we're a good fit. And then we talk about all that other things, like how long we would meet and how often and that sort of thing.
That's wonderful that that first consultation would be free, because again, they may be like, do I really need a coach? Do I really need this? And maybe once in a while you'll speak to someone, well, yeah, maybe you're doing it right, you're on the right path, but that way that helps them confirm whether I really need to do this or not. So
and whether I'm the coach for them, because perhaps
right.
I'm not. There are lots of great coaches out there. And so it really is determining, am I the right coach for them, and are they the right client for me?
Yeah.
So that we can do good together.
So thank you again, Dina. I love learning about you as a certified professional life and soul care coach. Again, I love that, life and soul care. That's deep. That's awesome. That's huge. Thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you for your wisdom and what you do. We appreciate you.
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me. And I appreciate what you do too, Krista. So keep doing good.
Thank you.